Yes, and I actually have that in my notes here. I have that as a special category in my mind of the manifestation of glory, because it seems that it was a vision that Ezekiel had. Although it was very real vision, he describes it. Let me read some of the passages. That's a very good one. Thanks for bringing it up. Chapter 10 and 11. Ezekiel 10, verse 4. Then the glory, and I went ahead and changed, whenever I read from this, I changed the Lord to Yahweh. It just seems especially important, significant in light of the subject matter. Then the glory of Yahweh went up from the cherub to the threshold of the temple. And the temple was filled with a cloud, and the court was filled with the brightness of the glory of Yahweh. And then the glory of Yahweh, verse 18. Then the glory of Yahweh departed from the threshold of the temple and stood over the cherubim. And then, chapter 11, verse 23, the glory of the Lord went up from the midst of the city and stood over the mountain which is east of the city. Fascinating, fascinating description. And I remember a teacher of mine years and years ago describing it. It's almost as if the glory acts like a person, and he's reluctant to leave. He leaves a little bit and then hangs out over the gate, and then he leaves and hangs out over the mountain, and it's like the glory is reluctant to leave. But the story is, in Ezekiel, is of the glory of the Lord leaving. And if you read Ezekiel, it's very obvious because it's because of the sin, egregious, grotesque sin of the spiritual leaders of Israel that the glory is leaving. So that's an interesting one because it seems to be all inside Ezekiel's head. And yet I would say, and probably most of us say, but it describes a reality. So I don't think anybody else saw the glory doing this. I think Ezekiel saw it, but I think he was seeing what wasn't visible to everybody else. Thanks for mentioning that, Ernie.
And kind of an unusual reality. It's an old covenant reality.
Yeah.
And it was the responsibility of the leaders.
Yeah.
And even then, I think there probably, maybe we're reading it, but there would be a reluctance because he still knows what is yet to come, and eventually he is going to be in relationship with each one and no longer having to go through this leadership thing that's causing the problem.
Yeah, that's right. When we get the priest of all believers, that we are all, what's the word? The glory responds. That's one of my theories, is that the glory of the Lord responds to human behavior. So that's a big
What's the
piece.
right at the beginning of chapter 2?
I don't know. What's it say?
Behold, this expanse that was over the heads of the cherubim, something like a sapphire stone, and appearance resembling a throne.
Yeah, okay, yeah, there you go.
And whirling wheels under the cherubim.
This is Ezekiel's famous. Ezekiel saw a wheel way up in the middle of the air. That spiritual. You get the full version in Ezekiel chapter 1. And this all is a description of the glory of the Lord. But again, I think it's all. Not everyone can see it. It's not all the captives standing by the river Chebar weren't standing there going. It was just Ezekiel standing there going. He was the only one that saw it. But I think it was a reality he was seeing, but it was invisible to everybody else. And if you want to read some really wild and crazy stuff, I love Ezekiel chapter 1. Most people think he was probably not on the streets. I mean, you think he was on drugs or something because his description is just. Well, I've never been on drugs, but I've heard people talk about it. And his description is really, really wild. But I like it because unlike John in the book of Revelation, where John just wimps out, he gets a trip to heaven, he gets a trip to heaven and comes back and gets to tell us about it. And he says, well, God's like an onyx or something, what's it? Beryl, emerald. And then I want to pull him down and send somebody else up there. Get this guy out of here. He's doing a terrible job.
No motion.
No. It's like a jewelry store up there. What is going on here? He's describing the glory of the Lord. But I feel like Ezekiel, so I think John was maybe the mystic or the poet or something. He just said, oh, it's like a great big diamond. and Ezekiel, on the other hand, is more obsessive compulsive. And he's trying to really describe it. Oh, no, it's like, and it's wild. It's just, I think there's something here, but it's a trip. And that's what's happening in the beginning of chapter 10. He's describing this. It's crazy. And if you want some really fun reading, read it. So but there is one other manifestation of the glory of the Lord, I believe, that most people miss, and this is the one that really flipped my switch of 10 years ago or so, and it's, of all things, 1 Samuel 3:21. And I'm going to try to resist the temptation to tell this story because it's such a good story, but I'll tell it very, very, very briefly. 1 Samuel 3. Samuel's a little boy. His mother gives him to the Lord. He gets taken to the tent where the Ark of the Covenant was when he's maybe 4 or 5 years old. Can you imagine that? And the Bible says every year his mother would come and bring him a new piece of clothing. And as little kids, we studied this in Sunday school. It was all so sweet that she brought him new clothes every year. Because as kids, we're not going, this is horrific. This is child abuse of the most outrageous order. He's living with an fat old man, the Bible says, fat old man named Eli, who's blind. He's not only blind physically, he's pretty blind spiritually. His sons are a bunch of rapscallions, and they're lying, cheating, womanizing, pretending to be priests, etc., etc. And I remember when I studied this, when I was told this as a little kid in Sunday school, I think the pictures in my Sunday school paper had pictures of Samuel like with marble columns. You know, he was in the temple of the Lord. It's a tent. There was no marble columns. Maybe it was a wooden pole. And my study of that passage led me to believe that the tent that Samuel and Eli and his sons were overseeing in this season was not the tent of Moses. It was not Moses' tent. There's another, I won't take time to explain why I believe that's true, but I could take you to Scripture. And little boy Samuel, it says he goes and sleeps, I need to read this, where the Ark of the Lord was. Where is it?
Verse 3.
Chapter 3?
3:2. Chapter 3.
Yeah, at chapter 3. And the Lamb of God had not yet gone out. And Samuel was lying down in the temple, quote unquote, even though we're told it was a tent, but it's called a temple here. Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the Ark of God was. Now, there are two ways linguistically to read that sentence. It either is saying that Samuel was lying down in the temple. Oh, and it's the temple where the Ark of God was. See, that's one way to read it. Or that verse is saying Samuel is lying down in the temple right where the Ark of God was. Okay, there's no way to prove which one of those is true. To me, the second is a much more interesting story. And it makes a lot of sense if this is an abused, traumatized kid. I mean, you understand he's living in a slaughterhouse with a bunch of rascals and an old senile man. This is not a happy picture. And every day they're slitting sheep's throats. You understand? And wrenching the heads off dogs. You understand? And spearing bulls. You understand? It's a 5-year-old kid. This is not a happy picture.
Sounds like growing up on a farm.
And yeah, exactly. It is, exactly. And so I think he goes and curls up in the only place that seems safe to him, which nobody else is there. He escapes and goes and sleeps next to the Ark of the Covenant. I can't prove that, but that's what that verse allows. And then it makes the next, what happens next all the more interesting. So what happens next? You tell me. What happens? What? Yeah, the Lord calls. You know that famous story, Samuel, and speak, Lord, your servant hears. So God talks to Samuel. So to me that makes sense, that if Samuel's curled up next to the Ark of the Covenant, et cetera, it just makes a really good movie that I'm going to direct someday, maybe even after I get to heaven. And so God starts talking to Samuel, which just seems like a hoot to me. And then Samuel delivers the word of the Lord to Eli, the old man. And it's a bad word, and Samuel does it anyway. Okay, so Eli says the next morning, okay, tell me what happened. And if you leave out one word, I'm going to pinch your head like a pimple. That's the Hebrew, the original Hebrew. They calm it down for the English. He says, may the Lord kill you if you don't tell me everything.